Welcome everyone to a podcast here with our Konami representative for today. Not officially, I'll clarify that in just a second. We have the commentator that we always enjoy seeing on the European coverage, and that's Mr. Oliver German here. Just want to clarify for everyone who may or may not be aware, Ollie is not an official employee of Konami, is that correct?
That is very important.
Yes.
Very important information, actually.
Yes. So you are contracted as a freelance caster for Konami, yes?
Yeah, that is exactly correct.
Cool, cool. So any questions that you might have or any concerns you might be wondering, like, hey, Ollie, when's the ban list coming? He doesn't know, probably.
Yeah, but I always claim I know because I just like to have fun with people. And there's a million people who actually believe that. So, but sometimes it actually backfires because then they send me like a million requests. I want this card on the ban list. I want this card to be like free straighters and stuff like that. And I'm like, yeah, I'm just gonna forward all of this to Matt. And,
I'll hook you up, yeah.
yeah.
So first of all, let's begin with you telling us a brief, short version of who you are and how you started playing Yu-Gi-Oh, and then how you kind of developed into the position that you hold with Konami today.
All right, yeah, no problem. So basically, I was studying many years ago. At this point, I'm super old.
How old are you?
I'm 35 now.
Okay.
So I was in my early 20s, and I was studying computer science. And while I was studying, I started to pick up the game because the show was on and everything. That was in 2003, so 16 years ago. And then towards the end of 2003, I got like a little bit more serious. We were playing this in like there's a room for the youth in my hometown. I'm from a small town with like 1,000 people. That's like, it's very rural. Everybody goes drinking every weekend, but let's not digress too much. So, but basically what I'm saying is that there was nothing else to do. So you could either drink or you could play Yu-Gi-Oh! And obviously Yu-Gi-Oh! Was the better option. And then starting 2004, got a bit more serious about it. There was like an online league at the time. And I played in the online league. There's a legendary question in the German forums where I was playing Creature Swap on my opponent's Nimble Momonga and attacked into it and attacked with it. And then I wanted to search my Nimble Momongas out from my deck. And then my opponent was like, yeah, you can't do that. And that was basically the start of my judge career because I was like, that can never happen to me again. That's just so annoying.
So I assume that you were the one who should be allowed to special summon, yeah?
It's a graveyard effect, so it ends up in your opponent's graveyard. So of course he gets to search.
Other creatures? Okay, right, yeah, I see.
Yeah, it's Nimble Momonga. I mean, obviously the card is so old. And then at the time, this was like a very chaotic time. So you didn't really have card rulings. You had some. You had like, if anybody knows this, if anybody has been around for 16 years, you might remember NetRep, which was like three guys that were translating rules from Japanese into English, and they tried to make it available to a larger audience. And they were searching for guys that could translate all of the rulings, which was like 3,000 card rulings at the time, something like that. And I was like, yeah, I'm game, I do this. And then I translated all the rulings from English to German, and after that, like the very short version is after that I was like the best judge in Germany. Like some people will disagree, but like at the time I was like sniping questions in the online forums, and then everybody knew me. They were like, "Oh, this Soul Warrior guy, he's like answering every question." So I got into judging. I didn't stop playing, but I played a lot less because I enjoyed judging actually. Went to the representative of Upper Deck back at the time, because back in the days we didn't have Konami. It was Upper Deck who was doing all the distribution in Europe and America. And I said to him, "You should really hire me because I know a lot of things about this game." So people know me as like a loudmouth and like a very extrovert person and everything. But just imagine like me, like twice as bad 16 years ago, because I was young and I didn't know that there were rules that you're not allowed to break and that you couldn't do certain things. And so I was just like full of myself at this point. I was like, you should really hire me. I'm like the best guy for this.
Sounds like a standard judge to me, really.
Yeah, so it's a really good way to become a good judge, to have this approach. And eventually I dropped out of studying. I said, yeah, this computer science thing is not working out for me. And I moved to Berlin because in Berlin was the German office of Upper Deck at the time. And I showed up in their office and told them, hey, you should really hire me. And Matthias was he was smart enough to see that there was potential despite like the ego and the other problems. And but that was in 2006. So I was already like, I had been doing this for like 2 years at the time. I had helped to staff the Faro tours, like the larger events in Germany, which were like the Shonen Jump championships, but in Europe, in Germany. And this is how it started. And then eventually I got a job with Upper Deck as a freelancer for 2 years. Then I was, for 2 more years, I was a full-time employee. So I was in the industry. I had like the inside look of what it was like with the company that was doing all the distribution and everything before eventually Konami took over, because Upper Deck was making some really, really dumb decisions, the American part of Konami. And then ever since I do you know about this story?
The Upper Deck story with
with the fake cards?
Yeah, I do. But if you could quickly clarify for everyone watching, I'm sure they would love to hear this.
Okay, so the head of Upper Deck is a guy that made his money by screwing other people out of their ideas. There's a book written about it, which is called Card Sharks. There's a very few in circulation, but it's quite interesting to read it, because
is there an
ebook? There were two. No, I don't think so. I don't think there's a version of this as an ebook.
So, that could be a really interesting read. We should do a book review of that sometime.
Yeah, we should do like a group read. That would be really fun. So, and also the name is just so funny, because Card Sharks, because he is like the spiritual animal of all the guys that do like the sharking moves in the tournaments. Just that he's like 50 times worse. So I try to condense this as much as possible. There were two guys. One guy was from a trading card game shop in America, and the other guy was like very familiar with printing processes and everything. And they teamed up and they said, hey, all the trading cards of these baseball players are terrible, so we're just going to start our own company. And they had all the knowledge. Like, one guy knew about the stores, what they need, the other guy knew about all the printing, and they produced high quality cards and got the licenses of the MLB and the MLS and all of these American leagues, and I don't know what their names are. And that's basically how the rise of Upper Deck started. But these guys needed money, and they brought in another guy. He gave them money, but he screwed them out of their own company, because it's a weird story, but he was doing things like, hey, we have to fly to this place and show these guys our product. I'm going to pay for everything. And then they were at the airport, and he was like, oh, it seems like my credit card busted. You have to pay yourself. So they were completely broke after running with him for like a week or something. And then he said, it's no problem, I can buy you out, because he was a millionaire. You just have to give me like 90% of the company. And this is how this guy ended up owning Upper Deck, even though the other two guys were the brains of the operation. And this extremely smart guy made the business decision of producing fake cards of Yu-Gi-Oh!, even though he was the guy that was owning the license of Yu-Gi-Oh! You just have to imagine that. Like, he's making 90% of his profits with Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards, and he's risking that license by pissing off the company and producing fake cards. And it gets even worse. Because
so what was the logic behind that? Was there any, like, what is the advantage of that?
He was frustrated that there were cards that were highly sought after, exclusives in Japan, and he wanted to... So just imagine that there's a card like Stratos, but it's not out yet in the Western markets.
Mm-hmm. And so like Needle Fiber, for example, right?
Yeah, but you can throw any card name at me. I have like zero knowledge about the OCG. And sure. This guy says, we need this card because we want to sell a structure deck or something. We want to insert it as a special card in the structure deck. And the Japanese guys from Konami and the other 4 license holders, because it's a very complicated. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is not owned by Konami. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is owned by 4 or 5 companies, which is ridiculous. They said, yeah, you can't have those. We need those for like the next Shonen Jump or something. And then he came up with the brilliant idea of just faking those cards. So he produced stuff that he didn't have an okay for. And that's what he did. And the weirdest thing is, like, you could spot the cards if you have them in front of you. And even if you're like relatively new to the game, you can tell that like the font was a little bit different. Like the Eye of Anubis logo in the corner wasn't like the golden one, first edition version. It was like the silver version. Like, it was very obvious that these were fake cards. And that's weird because the company producing the fake cards was the same company that's producing the original cards. So how dumb do you have to be?
I actually have some pictures up on stream right now of some Upper Deck cards. So this is Destiny Hero Dreadmaster, and I believe it's So I think this is a side-by-side comparison of the Upper Deck cards vis-a-vis the Konami official ones, and I think it's here that you can see the difference. Correct? Under the
it was different cards. It wasn't cards that have been reprinted by Konami later on or something. It was cards that should have not been printed, and they didn't look like super obviously fake, but like the font was like a little bit different, and the Eye of Anubis logo was very different in the corner. I don't know. They sent the marketing department to produce the fake cards, and that's, if you know anything about the games industry, you never send the marketing department to get a job done properly. Like, go to the OP department; they know what they're doing. So yeah, they dug their own grave basically, and that's how they lost the license, and that's why they had to lay off like massive amounts of numbers. I don't even know if the company still exists. But I'm not really following up on that.
Do you know what happened to him? Like the guy specifically?
Yeah, the guy, the head of the company, he died.
Oh wow! Oof.
I'm not. I think might have been alcoholism, but I honestly don't know this. But I've never in my life have I seen Facebook, because I was friends with a lot of my ex-colleagues, even from America. My entire Facebook feed was full of, yeah, good riddance.
Wow.
F you. There was not a single person. Not like there was maybe one person who said, I don't know the guy, but you shouldn't say these things about dead people. And then this person had it coming. After she posted that, there were like 20 people that gave examples like, oh, he laid off like my husband because he said the company's not making enough money, and on the same day he bought a private jet for his son. Stuff like that. Like really stuff where you like rubbing your eyes and be like, what the hell is happening? So this guy was terrible. Honestly, he was. But I have one funny story about this guy.
Okay.
So 2008 World Championship, they said I'm going to be the head judge, because I was kind of out of judging already, but I was still okay. I wasn't terrible, and I knew a lot of player management. So I'm arriving to the player meeting like the day before Worlds, and I'm like 5 or 10 minutes late, and I just get out of the subway, and there's the hotel where all the players and all the officials from Konami and everybody should meet. And I'm just getting out, and I'm like, okay, they're going to be super mad that I'm late because I'm head judge and I'm really important at this event, which is what I thought, which is not really the case. So I'm trying to downplay it that I'm late and give other people the opinion that I've been here forever. So I just see a group of people, and I randomly walk up to them, and I'm like making conversation. So I'm like, and there are like 4 Japanese guys and 1 American guy. And I'm just like walking up to them. I'm like, hey, hi, nice to meet you. I'm Oli. I'm the head judge of the event. Where are you from? And like the first guy is like, oh, yeah, I'm from Konami. I do this and this. I'm like, okay, cool. The next guy is like, yeah, I'm from Konami. I do this and this. This continues like 2 more. And then I'm asking the 5th guy. And I'm like, hey, where are you from? What do you do? And he looks at me like, what the fuck? How do you not know who I am? He didn't say this, but it was like the 4 Japanese guys, Japanese people, very, very nice. They never say anything bad, but they were holding it in. They were really holding it together. And I basically told the head of the company, I don't have a clue who the fuck you are. And
what's his name?
It was Richard McWilliam.
Okay, I did not know that. Interesting.
Yeah, it was. When I told that story later, my direct boss said, you are very, very lucky that you didn't get fired on the spot. Because that's the kind of guy he is. On the spot, yeah. He said, yeah, we're going to find a new head judge, no problem. Like, you are out of this, fuck you.
Wow. So the tale of Upper Deck is long and arduous. But it's interesting to know.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people don't know about the history. It explains a couple of things. It explains a couple of decisions that people don't like these days. Where they're like, why are they so careful about these things? And part of the reason is because the company as a whole got screwed over in the past.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense when you take into consideration some of the questionable decisions that Japan sort of hold against the TCG. I suppose a lot of it would be jaded from the fact that, Upper Deck did a lot of wrong with the game. Yeah,
I would say that's one. I mean, obviously, this is speculation because, again, this is important at this point. I'm not an official MP. But I can give you an example just to show you how this whole thing went down. So when I was working for Upper Deck, we were doing the Road to Nationals. So it wasn't like nowadays where it's an open national, everybody can just show up and play and end up in 115th place or something like that.
Not that anyone would care or know.
Exactly. So back in the days, you would have to qualify in a store. So we had like the store program, not just regionals. There were like a lot of, there was like a store championship, there was a regional championship, there was a state championship. Like there was like a tiered program that got you your spot at the national championship. And we were printing posters for the stores so they could advertise this event because it's a big deal for a store. Oh, we got the store championship and the first two guys are going to nationals. And we asked for that in September, if I remember correctly, and the road to nationals started like in January, and the nationals was, as always, like in May, late May, something like that. And we got the okay to use these posters in the stores 2 weeks before the nationals, which is obviously when all of these qualification events had already been in the books. Like we were at like last chance qualifiers and everything at that point. It just goes to show like some things need like 7 months just to get approved. And it was a poster with like Yugi on it, and like the store could write down its name and the date, and that's it. So you would think, why does this need like big approval? But as I said earlier, the reason is that 5 companies are holding rights on Yu-Gi-Oh! or instances, like the artist, Katsuki
This is a point that I wanted to go on to actually just after this. We sidetracked a lot from the original plan, but this is actually really interesting. So if you could clarify and break down the sort of rights to Yu-Gi-Oh! And how it functions, because a lot of people in the community are very sort of kind of under the idea that, well, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is Yu-Gi-Oh! And that is owned by Konami, and then Konami does this, Konami does that, Konami chooses this. But in reality, it's far more complex than that. And as you said, there's like 5 companies involved. Do you mind like breaking that down and explaining it to people who might not be aware for what that process is and how it's like handled?
Yeah. So like I don't have like super inside knowledge regarding this. This is not something I ever cared to research in depth. But what I know is obviously the guy who came up with the concept in the first place, he holds some rights to it. He went to the Shonen Jump magazine and they published it, but they said, yeah, we can publish that, but we want some rights. So they own like part of the license, basically. They have a say in everything that happens with Yu-Gi-Oh! And like the license as a whole. So if somebody wants to make like Funko Pops, they have to give their okay, even though they are a magazine and in theory they have nothing to do with this. Then it went on, I think, TV Tokyo or something, like on one TV channel in Japan. And they were like, yeah, we can send this. This is a great idea. We can turn this into an anime. And you don't only have the manga, you also have the anime. But they said, okay, we want to own part of the license. And this is how this continued. So then you have Konami as well, obviously. And I think 4Kids Entertainment, which was first responsible for bringing it to the Western markets in America. Yeah. I think these should be the 5 license holders.
There's also NAS and Shueisha, I think.
Yeah, Shueisha, I think, owns the Shonen Jump. Right. So that's the, but that's for example, that's the reason why we rarely have a band that is just like coming out on the internet. Very, very often the band list gets spoiled in the Shonen Jump magazine because the magazine is like, we want to have something exclusive, and since they hold the right or part of the rights, they can always like put pressure on everybody else and say, hey, we want to be the ones that publish the band list. And the thing is, print is slow. So you write a magazine and all the articles need to be in like, let's say 3 or 4 weeks before the magazine hits the shelves. So for that reason, we rarely have a band list that addresses all the cards that are like currently out there. We mostly have a band list that addresses the cards that were out there like a month ago or 2 months ago. And I mean, they try to look forward, but it's always something different. Like players come up with crazy card interactions that nobody came up with in playtesting.
Is this the process for the OCG ban list today?
As far as I know, but at least it was like that. I'm not sure if they ever changed this, but it's just a nice example of how Yu-Gi-Oh! Has unique problems when you compare it to another license, for example, Magic, where it's just one company holding all the cards. Unintended. So it's very different. They can rarely say we want to do this and this. There's always somebody else. So if Konami were to say, hey, we want to have prize money at events, there's a very good chance that TV Tokyo is saying, oh no, but we're advertising this to a very young audience and we don't want to get dragged into a suit in court where somebody claims this is just like poker.
Yeah.
Which sounds really dumb, but that's how companies work. They want to minimize risk.
Sure. So moving on to some more TCG specific stuff, I want to talk about a little bit about how events happen and such, because I would assume you're partly involved with the event process and the planning process. Do you know much about how Konami or whichever company it is that is in charge of planning the actual physical events in place for the TCG? How does that happen?
Yeah, I mean, I'm no longer really involved. Basically, I get asked, hey, do you want to be on the team? We kind of finalized everything. But I used to plan these events myself when I was working for Upper Deck. So I kind of know what it's like. Normally, it goes like this. The company in charge, back in the days was Upper Deck, now it's Konami, is reaching out to another company that is helping them set up and organize the event, which nowadays is Tournament Center, which are based in Belgium. For Europe, I don't know about the US, and so they reach out to them and they say, hey, we wanna have 4 YCS per year. This is our rough budget. Can you suggest some places? And then it costs more money if they need to go to places and find out if there's a venue available and everything, because they need to put in hours and research and everything. And that's one of the reasons why very often we end up in the same places these days, because they just decided that it makes, as far as I can tell, it makes sense to save the cost on doing research for new places to go to, and instead just say, hey, let's put all the money into the event itself and make sure that the event is as good as it can get.
Is it really that complex to just pick a different location?
Yeah, you would be surprised. So Düsseldorf, for example, we were at a fair, at a trade fair, and obviously they had like 10 different halls there. So opening up another hall and saying, oh, here you can have space for like another 1,000 players would have been a piece of cake for the venue. But they said, hey, your contract says you only have these 2 halls. We could give you another one, but it's going to be twice as expensive as the 2 halls that you already have, because that's how some of these guys make their money, or at least partially make their money. And we have once you have a location that is extremely flexible, like Bochum, for example, we had like 300 players more than we expected, and they said, yeah, they can sit outside. And like in the, I don't know, have you ever been to Bochum?
It was the sort of entrance area, right? Like
yeah, exactly. Like you just show up in, and they are extremely flexible, and that's one of the reasons why we like to go back to. Normally, whatever happens, they can work on a solution with you without you having to pay extra money half the time.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
those are some of the reasons. I mean, Rimini, for example, or as it is known as Rimini, they are dead cheap in the summer, because somebody in Rimini came up with the idea of having this conference center, because they have tourism and that's it. So someone in Rimini came up with the idea, hey, we should also have something else that draws people into town, and that's why they ended up with this conference center, which, especially in the summer when tourism is running, is dead cheap in comparison. I mean, dead cheap means, from what I know, and this is not like no one from Konami ever told me about prices. They just say you're aiming way too low. But 10 years ago, when I did this for Upper Deck and we would get a venue for 15,000 euros, they said, yeah, that's a good price. So there's a lot of people who say, oh yeah, Konami's making so much money at the events. All of the players are just there to pay for the venue. All of the hotel costs for the judges, the entire stream. I mean, we did a behind the scenes feature one time. You see there's like 7 people involved with producing the stream. I know you're making fun of this. You're always like, look at my production here in my little living room.
I could stream a YCS anytime. Just let me know.
Yeah, well, we're gonna, if they cut the budget, I'm gonna suggest.
So I know you're not personally involved, of course, with America, because as far as Konami is concerned, they are basically 2 separate companies and 2 separate Konami NA and Konami EU. Is that correct?
As far as I know, yeah. They Digital Europe or Digital Entertainment Europe. And I don't know the exact name of the American company.
Sure. So you might not be aware of this, and again, just to clarify for everyone watching, Ollie isn't like officially part of their planning process and stuff as Konami. He is freelance. hired by them rather than working for them. But if you are aware, could you maybe share some of the differences that you know between how Konami EU operates and plans and processes events compared to how they do it in North America?
So it's a bit of guesswork. I know that back works together with several premier tournament organizers. So if it was in like the Northwest, they would go to this one guy. If it was in Atlanta, for example, they would go to a different guy. So that's already one big difference, because in Europe, they always go to the same company. They always go to Tournament Center. So they know that all of the events are roughly the same. Whereas, and this is back in the Shonen Jump days, in the Shonen Jump Championship days. Back then, there was a big difference if you went to a Shonen Jump in New York or to one in Houston, because the tournament organizer was a different one. So they would make different decisions, what the public events would be like and things like that. So that's one big difference. Another big difference, as far as I know, is that they now have to pay people, the judges, the volunteers. Because it was like a ruling, I think the WotC judges, the Wizards of the Coast judges, the guys that do Magic, they basically sued Wizards of the Coast at one point and said, hey, we're not volunteers, we're like kind of full-time employees for a weekend here. You cannot pay us with like some product. But although they get judge exclusives, so lots of the product they get is like actually pretty valuable. It's not bad value as far as I know. And that's why Konami had to make some changes. And some people speculate, and I'm not saying this is an official thing, but some people speculate that the timeout rule just to cut down the tournament time, because then they have to pay 1 hour less to the volunteers in America, which would be really awkward when you think about it, because you don't want to make decisions that affect gameplay depending on business. Those should be two separate things. You should make decisions for the gameplay that are best for the gameplay, and business decisions that have to do with money are just like a side effect. You try to cater as much as possible to the guys that are looking for budgets and everything. But let's say that the timeout rules wouldn't be perfect right now. It would make sense to change them, even if the tournament is becoming a little bit more expensive, in my personal opinion, as a non-Konami employee.
Yeah, it is interesting how I suppose the time rules kind of came in place roughly around the same time as the Magic stuff happened with the judges they had. Maybe there's a relation there. Who knows?
I think that's why people drew this conclusion. Yeah.
And one little final point about that. How is Japan involved when you are being contracted to commentate or whatever? Like, do you personally apply to them? Do Japan have to accept you? Do they have to accept Konami EU's like choice for locations and events and how they're going to structure them?
I would guess so, because normally it's like this. When something is like completely up to the European, that's my experience, or at least that was the case when it was back in Upper Deck. When Upper Deck could ever decide themselves, things would be planned into the future. Like, let's say we would say, hey, we're going to Road to Nationals, there's going to be store championships and this and this and this and this, and they would just say, yeah, you do whatever you want with your market. It would be communicated the next day. And whenever there's something that needs to be okayed in Japan, it takes a lot longer because of these different license holders and everything. So I think if it was completely up to Konami Europe to just run 4 events per year, they would at the start of the year communicate all the venues and all the dates and everything for all of the upcoming championships. And because everything needs to be triple checked and approved, this is me guessing again. This should be the reason why sometimes it takes up to, I don't know, 8 weeks, 6 weeks in some cases before the event until we finally hear, oh yeah, this event is taking place. But to come back to your original question, because I think I can that, as far as I know, like in my communication regarding stuff, not talking to anybody in Japan. My only point of contacts are all in Windsor in the European office.
Sorry, just a little bit, if you don't mind, Ollie, can you go into your Discord settings and turn down your sensitivity because it kind of cuts you out sometimes.
My sensitivity.
If you go to the cogwheel in the bottom left and go to voice and
yeah.
video, there should be voice activity. If you just make that a little bit more sensitive, so drag the bar down a little because it cuts you off sometimes. You found it? Okay, I think you put it the other way around. I think you need to go in the opposite direction.
Is it better now?
Yeah, this is better. Okay, great.
Okay. Let's try that.
So one final point before we move on to stuff that I guess is your area. I wanted to ask about, and it's something that I've thought of a lot, and I know that there's a lot of issues with that come with this. But what is your thoughts on digitizing the preparation process for players to enter events? So, like, for example, if players had to electronically hand in their deck lists, I'm sure that would make your life a lot easier when doing coverage. Do you think that that's something that could be plausible?
Well, it's something that is planned because the problems that we currently have with the card app that is showing the card names on the stream when two guys are playing against each other, all of these problems arose because the system is based on the assumption that people are signing up online. So the system that we're using at the moment is assuming that all the deck lists are going to be in the system at the start of the tournament. That's why when we say, hey, we're going to have a feature match between Joshua Schmidt and Jake Quincy, we then on the spot have to enter the deck lists of Joshua and Jake because our system is not flexible in the sense that it says, oh, you can bring up any card you want on the stream. Like, the system can only pick from the cards that are in either Joshua's or Jake's deck. So I know that they plan this. There are some. If you know, last year there was this big change with the EU privacy thingy, the GDPR.
Yeah.
So a lot of lawyers, especially in larger companies, are always afraid when it comes to saving data. So they always advise the company and tell them, hey, you should not collect data from people because if you get hacked, then you have to do this and this and this and this.
Divulging deck lists and stuff.
Yeah,
Instead of credit card information, it's deck lists.
Exactly. That's what the hackers would go. They would go for this first. They would be like, oh, I know the lead tech of Joshua Schmidt now. Next tournament, I'm going to win a prize card. Woo! Yeah, so I know that it should be coming. It should have been here already because obviously it's not going ideal. We don't want to lose 10 plus minutes every round when we're doing a feature match because we would really like to be in line with the main event. I mean, for the people at home who are watching these streams, they don't really notice this. I sometimes say it on the stream, but the round gets paired. Everybody sits down. They kind of start playing, let's say, 5 minutes after the round was paired. At that point in time, we just put down our players in the feature match area. Then we have to enter the deck list, which takes like 7 to 10 minutes, depending on the deck list and everything. Then we have to instruct the players quickly. I mean, in perfect world, I do that at the same time, but I do a lot of things behind the scenes that people don't see. So I tell them, hey, this is how it's going to go. Then we need to wait for the end of the video that is currently running, unless it's a feature match, because nobody cares about old feature matches. And then we cut in and we're like, hey, we're live at the European Championship. It's going to be round 8, and we got a great match between a guy that's going to play Mystic Mine on his first turn and then pass. You're all going to be excited about this. And so this happens. I'm talking a little bit. The players sit down. They get hooked up with the headphones and everything, because these headphones that the players are wearing in the feature match are making sure that they can't hear the commentators or anybody else for that matter. So for that reason, we have to talk about the for like 5 more minutes before we can really start the match. Then they have the headphones on. Then it's time for the commentators to talk about the decks, and then we go back. And this entire process takes roughly 20 minutes. So when we start our match, we are 20 minutes behind the main event. And when we finish our match, very often we're like 20 minutes in overtime. And you know from experience that most of these events, they have like 40 minutes overtime in between rounds, but sometimes they don't. So in a perfect world, we would be 5 minutes behind the main event. Then we would know for sure we have 35 minutes now to do whatever we want before the next round gets paired, which means mini games, interviews, live interviews on the stream, do all of these funny things, but we can't, because any moment there could be a new round, and that's why we have to show so much pre-recorded content and show the same stuff very often. And like this is one of the things that frustrates me the most when I'm doing coverage, because it could be so much better, but the app that we're using is handicapping us in some ways.
Well, the thing is, it's like the app here doesn't sound like it's the one at fault, because I feel like the system is in place for this. It's just that you have to manually enter everything. So if everyone already had everything manually entered beforehand, this would just be an easy, streamlined process, surely.
That's a very good way to think of this. That's the favorite argument of the guys that developed the app. But I always, I'm like, yeah, in a perfect world, that would be the case. You are correct. But in reality, for the time being, that's not how it works. So we should adapt to current reality.
Do you think it could be an idea going forward? Like before an event, players have to digitally like enter their deck list?
100%. They did this in Magic, I don't know, 3 years ago, something like that. And Magic events, they would start the registration on the Saturday, just like in Yu-Gi-Oh! And then the event would start at like 10. I mean, the registration would go from, let's say, 8 to 9 or 9:30, and the event would start at 10 or 10:30. So Magic was pretty quick when it came to that, because they don't do this ridiculous shenanigan of collecting all the deck lists when the players are signing up for the event, which is, don't get me started. So I was at a Magic event after they changed it. So there was digital, or you could sign up the day before. There was no sign up at all on Saturday. Mm-hmm. So they said, we're going to start this tournament at 8:30, and they started at 8:40. And then there was a guy sitting next to me, and he's like, man, and he was serious. He was not kidding. Man, can you believe these judges? We're already running late, and we just were supposed to start. I was like, what the fuck, dude? Have you ever been to another game? Like to, I don't know, any other trading card game in the world, but specifically Yu-Gi-Oh!, where we're like, oh, we want to start at 10, but it could be 12, because that's the way it is. And
this guy was like mad about 10 minutes, but
10 minutes. I mean, he was German, so supposedly he tries to be on time and everything. But I was like, dude, chill.
Because as far as I'm aware, for the World Championship, players have to electronically finalize their deck list by like Thursday evening. Like that's like 2 days in advance before like the event starts. So for something like YCS's, I mean, I think it would be a cool idea if, Friday or Saturday midnight or something, your deck had to be online, perhaps, because the system is in place. I was checking out the website yesterday. Like it's there.
Agreed. There's and as far as I know, many people inside Konami agree with that as well. It's something that gets that's not here yet, because of weird reasons, and it might be the lawyers, which brings us to the famous Shakespeare quote. First thing we're going to do, let's kill all the lawyers.
Wow.
So, it's a quote. It's not from me. I'm just quoting Shakespeare.
Yes, of course. We don't support indiscriminate murder
I
lawyers.
don't promote killing anybody.
So for the well, I mean, like if that's the case, I mean, Magic does it, so like surely there can't be any legal issues.
I think they tried it, or they wanted to try it for the Austrian National Championship this year. They wanted to pick one of the still important events, but smaller. I'm not trying to offend anybody here, and that's why they said, "Hey, Austrian National seems like a good opportunity to check this." I don't know what came out of this, to be honest. I didn't follow it up, but obviously, I mean, people are reading their pairings on their phone these days, so there is no reason not to do this. And this little extra gimmick that people have when they can go into their hotel room and play through the night, and then in the morning make a different decision. Yeah, it's nice, but do we really need that?
Yeah,
I don't think so.
I understand the argument. Like some people love to like meet their friends in person, so they arrive like Thursday night, and then like they'll play test through the Friday, and then they'll come to more conclusions about their deck list for Saturday morning. Joshua Schmidt, for example, I know is famous for writing his deck list in the line, but that's probably something that we can do away with, perhaps.
I mean, when we say these things, there's probably Marcello would immediately throw us under the bus. He's like, do you know how I won my house in Nice? He would be like, I was at this European Championship, and then I hadn't written my deck list. I checked out all the other players in the venue, realized this is the right deck to play. Then in the line, I was writing my deck list, and this is how I won Euros. So obviously, there's going to be like 10 stories like that from from famous players. I'm sure it's going to be the same in America. But at the end of the day, like really, like well, you should come prepared to these tournaments. You should know on Friday what you're going to play tomorrow. That's my personal opinion. I'm sorry. I know this is not the professional opinion of someone like Ruff, who's in the chat, who's like, hey, that's how I won 2 YCS.
So for some of the advantage as well, just before we wrap this up, I watch a lot of other card games. I'm very into Hearthstone, for example, and when I watch like the Hearthstone streams and stuff, they have like, and this would, I feel like Konami would be able to do this if they have it digitized. Like you have like a Twitch extension that shows an overlay on the screen, and you can. Right. I believe Magic does it as well. You can like hover over, like when you're sitting at your computer, you can hover over the cards, and you can like read it and stuff. You can see like their hands very clearly.
Yeah.
So I think there's so much potential there if we were to move to digital completely.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of odd that the company is called Konami Digital Entertainment. I'm just throwing that out there. That's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah, Konami paper entertainment, I suppose.
So, yeah, no, but honestly, they are on it. I don't know if they did it in Japan. They have their own championship series there, as far as I know, which is best of one, which is completely beyond me. But I wouldn't be surprised if they had it first. I think they even have it in Japan already. I heard this. Somebody mentioned this to me. They said, oh yeah, you can register online in Japan.
Yeah, I heard about that. It was the first Japanese YCS, Osaka, I think it was. It looks pretty cool. But
it's
best
kind
of one,
to be honest. Like we've been doing this for I don't know how many years, like 10 years or something, and the Japanese are like, yeah, you're not allowed to do this, and then they're like, we're gonna run our events, and we're gonna do it. And
do you know if like how successful it was for them, like from a structural sort of company?
No, I don't know. But again, I just heard it through the grapevine, so I don't really know this. And obviously, someone in Konami knows it, and they are having talks about this.
Cool. So before we move on to the actual coverage, so I suppose this is kind of relevant, but are you aware of any, I don't know if maybe you don't want to say, but if there's any like special plans going forward? Do you guys have any like ideas in the works for coverage going forward?
I mean, at the moment, everybody's obsessing over Worlds. Everybody in the office is obsessing over Worlds. So I write these briefings after events, which are sometimes 20,000 words long, where I point out all of the things that I think we could improve. And like European Championship was kind of disappointing in some ways because I mean, obviously viewers of the stream, of the official stream, not your stream, they might have been like, oh, this was a great show. Everything was working perfectly. But the weird thing is I started working on my report after the event, and then obviously I look at the old report to see, oh, what did I suggest last time? And there were like 5 things in there that we ended up doing during the tournament, and we could have done them prior to the tournament, and that would have saved us 2 hours at least, and maybe more. So one of my suggestions was like, we need more guys that are doing commentary. And we ended up with more guys doing commentary, but we brought them in. They were there first as players, and then I was allowed to recruit them to the coverage team because I said, hey, Daniel and Marcello, they cannot go 3 days back to back to back and just cast match after match. That's not how it works. We want to have more guys. And then I said, and with JJ, it's especially ridiculous because JJ, he is like 40 minutes away or something from the venue. So his travel costs, which is a factor, they would have been like completely, you shouldn't have cared about those. And that's things that then I don't like, because obviously you're putting in the work, you're telling the guys, hey, this is what we should be doing in my personal opinion. But it was a very special situation prior to Euros because PJ, who many of you guys know, he left the company. And PJ was, in the past, partly at least, responsible for coverage. And then Luke, who was basically taking over for PJ, he switched departments inside Konami. So he's still with Konami, but he's in a different department. So Luke was also like, yeah, it's no longer my deal, as far as I know, or I guess. So they had a lot of handovers, and then they approached everybody pretty late. And that's why it was a bit chaotic going into Euros weekend. I think we made the most of it. I think a lot of people who were at home said, yeah, it was a great show. But the prep work wasn't up to the level that I would have liked it to be.
So another question I wanted to have here is, it's the more you've talked about it, the harder it seems to do this. But what do you think, and how realistic do you think it'd be to employ a backup feature? Because I feel like that's something a lot of us as viewers would love, because sometimes games are just done in like 10 minutes and then you're just waiting like an hour plus for the next feature match. So, what do you guys think if you had like 2 feature matches running side by side, so that maybe you could switch during siding, or like go after the first match has finished?
Yeah, so the main reason why this is problematic is because we only have so many cameras, and every camera costs extra money. So the guys that are providing all the equipment, everything you ask them, they are going to be putting on the list, and it's going to affect the budget. So we have this. So last weekend we had another camera which allowed us to stream from another area that was not the main event stage. We didn't do like a whole lot of live interviews. But there was one interview in between rounds, like towards the end of the first day, and also after the end of the Swiss rounds, where we basically just sat players down and we said, hey, let's stream from here. And like in the past, we could only do this either in the commentary booth or on the main event stage, which doesn't make a lot of sense, because standing in front of the feature match table interviewing someone is a very awkward thing when they're not playing in the next minute. So for that, we need an extra camera, for example. And if you wanted to have like a full setup with a second feature match, you have to keep in mind we got one camera top down, and then we have 2 cameras on the faces of the players, and then we have the third camera which is giving you like the total view, which is the one that we're using when we're going into the feature matches. So if you want to replicate all of that, we would be talking about 4 more cameras. And there was one event where somebody said, oh, we have to get another camera for this. It's 300 per day. And I was like, what? The camera is that expensive? Why am I not making more money? If it's just a camera, it's not doing like a whole difficult job. It's just sitting there and recording stuff. I'm doing all the work. I should be earning way more than the camera. So so that's one of the factors. We did do a second feature match at one event. I think it was Bochum. We're narrowing it down to 7 events. No, it was the Bochum where Billy Brake went against Joshua Schmidt in the finals, which is 2017, 16, something like that.
16, I think it is. Or early 17.
Yeah, I think 17 was when Joshua won in the finals.
There was a Bochum at the end of 2016 and a Bochum at the start of 2017, I believe.
The chat says 16, and the chat is always right. That's one of the things I learned. So anyway, at this event we did it. And there was a bit of a logistical problem, obviously, from moving in the players into our area where we did the feature match. And we didn't do it that often. We did it like 3 rounds. I think 1 round we were able to show everything after the first duel. So it ended up 2-1. So that meant 2 more games. Another time we only had the final duel and it was over very quickly. So that didn't really pay out. The third time I think it was okay. We had like 1 duel, but it was a very long duel. It went back and forth and everything. So that was the event where we tried this out. And the feedback that the official guys gave me was like, it didn't seem like people were really appreciating the extra effort. And the tech crew obviously didn't like it, because that means they get less of a break. And they're also working hard. I mean, there's guys that need to, basically they direct the stream. They say, oh, we're going to this camera, we're doing this. And they are smokers, so they like to take a lot of breaks. And so they didn't like it, and they said we didn't really have a lot of positive feedback about it. So we're not like the biggest fans of the idea. I personally think it's cool, but yeah.
It seems like a lot of logistics involved, I suppose.
Yeah, someone says that Magic does it with a floating camera. I don't know. Last time I was at Magic events, which is 5 years ago, but it's going to be upcoming this weekend. They had just 4 setups. They had just 4 setups with a camera on top of the table. Wasn't like the highest quality stuff, but they could instantly switch from one table to the next. Even when somebody was side decking, they would be like, oh, let's just take a look at another match. So that was amazing in my personal opinion. But then you need like another guy who is keeping track of what happens in the match that you're currently not featuring, and that means you have more staff on top of more tech equipment, and complicated.
I think, I mean, they don't necessarily have to track all of the cards and stuff like they normally do for like the side features. I suppose because like when we're watching the American YCS, they claim that, you know, their table judges are inputting all the data and relaying to the stream, but they don't have any information on stream. I don't know if you watch the NAWCQ, but there's no hand information, no cards in gray, so I don't really know what the table judges are doing there. So it's not necessary for us to know all these in-depth details. If it's just, as long as it's just something for us to see, I think a lot of people would appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big difference in terms of what you want to have at these events. So in our case, for example, we do have a table judge, but then we have on top of the table judge, we have volunteers who are working in the card data into the app. So it's not the table judge that's doing this; it's two more guys.
Okay, this is a really interesting point because from what my understanding is, at least this is what I heard from an American employee. So just to clarify, in Europe, when you have a feature match, do you have someone specifically responsible to maintain the game state and to maintain, you know, everything is going on that everything that's going on is legal?
That's the table judge. That is in theory that's the table judge, and sometimes we even have two of those guys. So yes.
And then on top of that, the two handling the reeling of information.
One guy per player, basically. He's standing behind the player and he's working on the little app and dragging cards from left to right, graveyard to field, and so on.
Okay, that's interesting. So you can see a big difference between, I guess, how the regions handle it.
At the end of the day, it's mostly a question about budget. I mean, this stream stuff is not cheap, and there's a legendary post in a German message board many years ago where people were discussing about how expensive an event is, and there was like a 15-year-old or 16-year-old, and he said with full conviction that these events are not cheap. It takes probably takes a very high triple-digit amount, and I was losing my shit. I was like, triple digits?
Wow!
Like for 1,000, you're getting like 5 chairs in here. That's what you get. Like we're talking. I mean, so YCS in Europe, 50 judges.
Yeah, let's get a cost breakdown. This is interesting.
Okay, I'm just running through it quickly because I've done this a million times. So because we have infinite languages spoken in Europe, 50 judges. 50 judges all need hotel rooms. Even if you put them in double bedrooms, it's 25 rooms for 3 nights. Room on average, 60 to 70 euros. Somebody crunched the numbers, I'm not doing it. But that's already a lot of money at the venue. Depending on the venue, between 15,000 or 25 or even more than 25,000. There were venues that cost 50K. So that's on top of it. You need the tech crew for the stream, at least in Europe, so that the commentators and everybody gets paid. You have like 7 guys behind the scenes, like one director, one who's coordinating everything. You have a guy just doing graphics all day. You have a guy doing social media postings. We have a guy who's editing the stuff that we record on Friday and the stuff that we record in between rounds. You have a camera person, obviously, and missing one more guy, but sometimes we have a guy who's just there to make sure that the app is working. He's got the most miserable job in the world. So 6 or 7 people, and this is an external company. This is not like a volunteer where you're like, oh, here's a box of product. You're fine for the day, right? Wink, wink. No, they're like, no, we're talking about serious money, and even if it's the intern in the company, they want money for that guy, and I mean, if you know anything about staffing fairs or bigger events like that, even like the demo girls at an event, they get like $300 per day sometimes, and they know nothing about what they're doing. They just there to look good. In our case, these guys sometimes look good, but very often they know exactly what they are doing. So, like on average, you can easily calculate 250 euros per person for 7 guys for 3 days. They all need hotel rooms, obviously. Most of the time, not double bedrooms. Most of the time, single bedrooms. So, like, it adds up very, very, very quickly. And we haven't even started talking about Tournament Center, the company that is putting together all the organizational stuff. They need like 5 to 7 guys to do the build-up and the deconstruction at the end of the event. I don't know. It might be 20. I don't know. But I always see like 5 to 7 guys throughout the day. Sometimes more, or often more actually. They need to do the research, they need to do the planning before the event, and so on and so on and so on. I don't know. Like, these events are very easily 6 digits.
Really? That
No.
high? I was thinking more like maybe in the ballpark of like 50, 60?
No, 50K sometimes just the venue. I'm not kidding. Just the venue is sometimes up to 50K, but let's be conservative and say the venue is 20K. If you add up all the other costs, you will end up with 50K very easily, and more likely you're going to be, if it's something like London where you pay ridiculous amounts of money to be on that Comic-Con or whatever it is, we're easily talking about 70K or even 100K. And I'm talking easily. I still don't have the entire overview of what goes into this.
And it doesn't sound like they're making a profit, basically.
They're not making any money from these events. Everybody who's, I mean, I get it. Honestly, I've been a player before. I've been doing this crap for 16 years. So if somebody's telling me, hey, I'm really involved in this game, I'm like really invested in everything, I get it. I'm with you 100%. But these events are 100% marketing. We only run these events to advertise the game and draw more people in and give them a reason to play. And that's the only thing. Like, we are not running, Konami is not running these events to make money, because they don't. They're losing infinite money on these events. Infinite money. They are making money with the cards that are being sold, and obviously it's a good thing if these events are happening because people will buy cards. But they are not making a single euro with these events. There is a slight chance that YCS Düsseldorf number 2, the smallest side event, that this made a profit. But we're talking about like $1,000 or something, because they found this second venue and it was like not super expensive. It was like somewhat cheap. They had like 500 players for this. But I don't know. I don't think the venue was, I mean, even 500 players, so that's $20 per player. So that's 10,000. You have to withdraw the product that they get, but the product is that cheap to Konami, obviously. So we're talking about roughly, let's say 8,000 that they made. The venue might have been 5K. And then if it's a really cheap venue, and then they could have made a small profit after paying all the charges and the hotel rooms and everything, because we don't do a stream of YCS 2 Düsseldorf, but we're talking about like making 200 euros for the small event and losing 30,000 or more on the large event.
How much do you think it would cost as a player to enter a tournament if they tried to break even?
That's a really good question, but
because I know that Magic pay a lot more. Like, I think exactly. A Magic entry is like 50, 60.
I would have gone for that, yes. That would have been my example. Magic, they used to pay like 50, which is already a lot, obviously. But I think they had other events where they now went up to 70. But they do get prize money in the end. But the Magic events are run for profit. The Magic events, I mean, obviously they're also to advertise. I say obviously a lot. Somebody pointed this out when he watched me on the stream. But the Magic events are different in the sense that Wizards gives these events to their premier TOs, and they say, you can do whatever you want. We give you the prize support. We take care of certain things, like we get you the coverage guys, for example. But you are running the event. You need to get all this. You need to get the venue. You need to get the judges. This is all on you. But you keep the money. So Wizards is kind of out of the equation, whereas Konami is running these events themselves. So they have less of a profit incentive because they know that we're doing this for marketing purposes. And despite a lot of people saying, oh, we should really have like a pro player program and all of these things, there are people in some office in some part of the world, probably Japan, not necessarily from Konami, but very likely from one of the other license holders, as we talked about earlier, that are saying, hey, this is a children's card game, and we don't want people to play this to make infinite money. We want people to play this because it's fun and a cool experience and hanging out with their friends. And then you have very different ways of approaching this and very different goals, what you want to get out of an event. And that leads to, well, let's just call it what it is. I mean, we don't have the best prices. Like somebody in German Nationals made top 16 or something, and he was sent home with like, I don't know, 12 booster packs, maybe a box. It was breaking my heart. I was feeling for the guy. I was like, man,
Depends what he
That
holds. I mean, I don't know. Maybe,
I was like, I should start a conversation with him, but there's a very good chance that I'm going to mention how much I'm making on commentary, and then he's going to go home and cry and never wake up from his sleep.
A key thing that I think that a lot of companies have when they host their events like Magic and Hearthstone and stuff is they have sponsorships. They have other companies involved. That is something we never see at YCL. Why do you think that is?
Well, again, I mean, let's say it's. I mean, it depends a lot, but like all of the guys that are doing anything of video games, for example, all of these entertainment companies, like a Nintendo or like a Sony and so on, it's very unlikely that they sponsor these events because Konami might think that they are competitors. Then you have people from like other kinds of entertainment that has anything to do with like TV channels or something, and then there's a chance that like Shueisha or TV Tokyo is like, oh, we don't want to have this sponsor, they are a competitor of us. So this might be the reason. I'm not 100% sure. I mean, this upcoming weekend I'm at a tournament, which is a Magic tournament, but it's sponsored by Red Bull, and I mean, to me it makes sense. When I played, I drank a lot of energy drinks. A lot of people tell me that's not healthy, but I see the connection there between TCG guys and energy drinks. So there's a chance that it's becoming more common, and then eventually that it's also gonna start with Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Konami rather. But it's hard to tell, and I can't give you exact reasons because I honestly don't know.
I don't know if you remember, but the World Championship last year was specifically sponsored by McDonald's, and it was sponsored by Intel.
That must have been in America, right?
No, it was Japan.
In Japan, and they allowed McDonald's to sponsor this.
Correct me if I'm wrong, chat, but last year the World Championship was in Japan.
I do think I remember that, yeah.
It was sponsored by McDonald's and Intel.
Yeah, well, that's crazy. If you ask me, that's totally crazy. I think there was some events at Upper Deck that were at least partly sponsored. With like,
it sounds like sponsorships would completely solve any sort of monetary issues with YCSs.
Yeah, I mean, you see that with the esports when like the chair company is spending 20K, and I'm like, how many chairs do you have to sell to get this back? Which is ridiculous. Yeah. So here's an interesting question. If we want to pick up one from the chat,
I will be going into the Q&A soon.
Sure. Okay.
So yeah, I will remember your question. But let's just go to the final section here really quick. When you are casting and stuff during an event, when you're like doing your coverage issues, what are some of your fears that players might do, or fears that just generally like might affect like the stream or like the coverage itself?
I mean, for me personally, the biggest problem is always that English is not my first language. I didn't do a lot of casting in German, but there was last year, might have been last year, might have been the year before. I'm confusing things at this point. I was at the Spiel, the big toy fair in Essen in Germany, and I was doing German commentary for an online game for Amazon, which didn't get released in the end, but they were promoting it there. They wanted it to be like a big thing, but it didn't end up being that. And I was like, this is so easy. This is so easy when you're doing it in your first language. I was honestly, after that event, I was looking down on the UK guys. I was like, how can you not do like amazing commentary 24/7 when you're doing it in your first language? How is this challenging for you? Because to me, I mean, obviously I have some go-to phrases and words that I use a lot, but that's part of the deal. I very often there's when you have these phrases that would get to the point really, really quickly without you having to talk around the topic, like all of these idioms in English that you have, something like, oh, would you say that this card saved the day for you? That's like the short version of saying this, and then the German guy that learned English in school would say something like, would you agree that this card has been like really good and really important in like the second game and the third game? Like you never get to the point. You don't have like the idiom right in front of you that just wraps up this entire statement that you want to make in like one short sentence because it's not your first language. and that is such a big difference maker. Like I said to all the UK guys, they should all sound like Thomas Rose all the time. They should be like super eloquent all the time and have like the best ways to express something. Like, oh, this tech has a very high ceiling, and I'm like, couldn't even think of that phrase if you gave me like 2 days and locked me in a room or something, and I should come up with phrases for this. So okay, so that's personally for me. And then, I mean, players are okay. We didn't stream for a very, like, if you remember, we have now been streaming for 5 years. When we started streaming, we didn't do any player interviews. No winner interviews, no player interviews, no nothing. Because there were people that were afraid that a player would say something like, he would curse, or he would mention something like Dueling Book. Jesus Christ. Or like things like that you are not supposed to say on the stream. And I was the guy who was pushing for this. I was like, it's going to be fine. Let me do interviews with players. I'm going to brief them. I'm going to tell them what they can say. I'm going to make sure they don't say certain things. And we did like, I don't know, 10 interviews. Everything was fine. And then we did an interview with Sona, and he mentioned his team, which he wasn't supposed to mention. And he mentioned his sponsor, which he wasn't supposed to mention. And then he mentioned on top of that probably also Dueling Book or whatever it was at the time. And I was like, oh, we're so fucked. We're never going to do another interview after this. So
thank you, Sonar.
Yeah, but those are the things. I mean, personally, I don't think it's the end of the world if somebody's doing an interview and he says Dueling Book. I understand from Konami's perspective why they don't want to advertise it. 100%. I'm with you. You don't want to advertise the guy that is stealing from you because that's what they're doing. I get that. I also get the players who are like, hey, I want to test this thing. I don't know if it's any good. I don't want to buy all the cards. I want to try it, and preferably for free, and see if it's any good. And then I'm going to buy all the cards, hopefully. So I understand both sides. Yeah, but it's just something that's part of the game.
Yep. I mean, I'm with you. I can completely understand like why, you know, like in the end, like intellectual property is a very serious legal matter, and they have to preserve that in some way. And I get, you know, simply not advertising it isn't a lot to ask for the players, like live on stream.
Yeah.
For the for the events that you've been to and stuff, what would you say is like your single like worst experience you've had like at an event, like regards to coverage? With regards to coverage, not like, you know, the night out or something.
but even with regards to coverage, I mean, I've been doing this forever and ever. So it's not like 100% coverage, but I was doing coverage at the event, and it was at the European Championship, probably 2008, but roughly in that area. So it was in Milan. It was in Italy. It was in Italy. I'm not sure if it was Milan, but very likely in Milan. And it was the top 8 match. So it's the most important match of the day, because even back then, or at least I think it was the first year where they changed this, might have been the second year when they changed this, the top 4 guys from Euros would go to Worlds. So I was doing coverage, back then obviously written feature match. So I was on the table, and there was one German player in the top 8, or at least one, Michael Grüner, who many people know obviously. And he was in a situation where he said, I attack with my monster. It was a monster that was weaker than the opponent's monster. Do you want to respond? And he was very certain that the opponent had something face down, like a Sakuretsu arm or something. Sakuretsu arm, which just saying that is hilarious. So the opponent says, yeah, I don't have any responses. Damage step. Because he obviously wants to see Michael Grüner's monster die. And then Michael says, no. Before we go to damage step, I want to play enemy controller. And the opponent goes, he's Italian. No, you can't. No, the timing is gone. If we both say we don't want to do anything, we're going to go to damage step, and then your monster dies to my monster. And I was sitting next to that, and it was at a time when I was like a level 3 judge, which was the highest level you could get, and I was very much involved with the rulings and everything. I knew how everything worked, and I knew about priority. So the short version is if the game state changes, the game state is like the last thing that happened in the game. So you say, I declare an attack. Now the game state is an attack has been declared. And then you got priority. You say, I don't want to do anything. Opponent says, I don't want to do anything. Then the game doesn't automatically advance to the next phase. The game only advances to the next phase after both players have passed on an empty chain. And that means, so now nobody has done anything, but we still don't go to the damage step. First, both guys have to say, I'm passing again. And nobody ever does this at events. Nobody's like, especially with the exception of Vittorio Victor, who was always a draw phase every round. So Michel knew this because I was like mostly responsible for everything that happened in Germany with judging and teaching all the judges how the rules were working and everything. So most of the better judges in Germany knew this, and most of the better players knew it for that reason. So he knew that he could play enemy controller. The head judge of the event, however, was an Italian judge. And the Italians at the time weren't quite up to speed. Some people would say they're still not up to speed, but that's on me. I'm not saying that. Italians, you're great. You give me lovely food, very lovely food. So the head judge of the event ruled that Michel Grüner is not going to be allowed to play the enemy controller, which means that his monster would suicide. And 2008, 11 years ago, I was losing my shit. Obviously, I shouldn't really get involved because I was a coverage guy, but I had a temper back then, more so than I have now. And I said, wait a second, can we have a conversation? And then I explained priorities to the head judge of the event, which was a very surreal experience. And the event was obvious. It was the prestige event of Upper Deck at the time. So there were people from Upper Deck in there that were very, very high up the food chain. And half of these guys don't know about the rules at all because they were in marketing. And like I said, you never send a marketing guy to get the job done. So the marketing guy was like, this doesn't make sense to me. Can you explain this to me? So I explained the marketing guy, who has maybe played with a starter deck once in his life, how the rules of Yu-Gi-Oh! Worked. And I got it to the point where the marketing guy said, I understand. All of this makes perfect sense. I believe you are right, but we cannot prove that you are right because there was an email list only for level 3 judges, and the Italian head judge was a level 3, and we were the only two guys in Europe that had access to this. But I couldn't find the email because you cannot really search in emails, especially because I signed up for the judge list with my soulwarrior@sailormoon.com email address, which was maybe not the brightest decision in hindsight. And so I couldn't find it. I couldn't prove this to him because there were like 200 emails, and I had to find the one that explains how priority works.
This is a 2008. Just for everyone clarifying, some of you in chat might be a little bit young to understand, but this wasn't exactly the most prestigious era of the internet and search functions through email. So this would be a long process to do.
That's also true, yeah. So that was really awkward. They came up with a decision like they were rewinding the game, and he could go back and before his battle phase or something before the last attack, but it changed the entire outcome of the game. The opponent knew that there was a face-down enemy controller. He could play around everything that Michel had at that point. It was a bit like a desperation move, but it would have gotten him somewhat back into the game, but didn't really work out. And I got so much flack for this move because they were like, why do you get involved? You're like a coverage guy. You should just shut your mouth and sit there and write down what happens. And my passion was still with judging. I mean, I had been judging like 3 years or 4 years before that. I had head judged national championships and in different countries. I had judged a lot of events, and my background was in judging. I ended up in coverage by accident, completely by accident, which is yet another story. But yeah, so that might be probably the single worst experience I had at a tournament. And weirdly enough, almost the same thing happened many years later, where a judge, not consciously, but the judge screwed out a player of going to Worlds at another European Championship.
For the amount of time that you've been doing coverage, I mean, that's pretty bad, but it doesn't sound like, ruining the event.
Yeah, it's not like the building burned down or something. Yeah,
that's not too bad.
Could have been much worse, yeah.
One thing...
I don't know if... we had one event that we had to cancel one day before the event. but that was not me doing coverage. That
Which
was,
event was this? Oh, Lille, I think.
no, I don't know about that, but
Lille was
a
cancelled because of...
there was a YCS Magdeburg, and
sorry, what? Mac...
sorry, not YCS. It was a Fortune Tour, which was like the precursor of the Shonen Jump Championship in Germany, which is like super way back. And one day before the event was held, that was in around the time when Upper Deck lost the license for Yu-Gi-Oh! And they were suing. They were like, "Hey, we want to keep the license," and Konami was like, "Yeah, they're going to keep the license." And then like the situation was a bit in limbo for like 3 months, where nobody really knew who would be in charge. And in that time, the event was supposed to take place, and then one day before the event, we had to announce the event is cancelled, and
Wow.
people were not happy about this. I mean, some would say that Magdeburg is not worth a visit, and I would agree. I would definitely agree with that. But still, like, it would have been a good event.
I mean, one thing that I know, I personally experienced, I had hotel booked, I had flights and everything booked, was YCS Lille in 2015, I want to say.
Right.
That was cancelled, I believe, 3 weeks or so in advance. That was unfortunate.
I think like the CCG guys were running an event instead of the YCS, if I remember correctly.
That was the redeeming factor. Was there was a what's it called, a CSL, I think, or
something like that.
That they planned as a replacement, which I guess was kind of cool. So that that was awesome. But in terms of Konami, I mean, it was just sorry guys. Which I felt like was a bit of an overstep, that something tragic that happened in France at the time. But cancelling a YCS in a completely different time,
now I remember, yeah.
I feel is maybe a bit of an overstep.
Someone in the company must have thought, this is, again, not me officially speaking on behalf of Konami, but someone must have thought, what happens if there's another terrorist at the YCS? We're not going to sell a single card anymore for the rest of our lives. And he didn't look at it from a strictly business and PR perspective. He also thought about, these many, many lives should not be lost. I'm not trying to say that the guy was only thinking about the money here. And I think that was the reason why. I remember that the event after, which was probably one of the Pragues, there was like heavy back checks and everything. They were very afraid that something might happen. And I was like, I don't know terrorists. I don't have a lot of terrorist friends, but if I was a terrorist, I wouldn't be like, where's the YCS next weekend? This is my point of attack. This is where I should go.
Yeah. Top cut. I'm getting
just saying. If you want to burn down a city, start with Venice. That's a really shitty city.
Okay.
Just throwing that out there.
What was my next question? Oh yeah, sure. One thing I wanted to ask was with regards to the quality of gameplay for some feature matches. So I understand, of course, that we can't have the same old players every single feature match and stuff. One issue that I have, for example, when I'm watching, the biggest example would be something as prestigious as the EUWCQ or NEWCQ. In the lead up to that, we know the world's race. We know who is gunning for that position. So for us personally, for me personally, I feel like I speak for a number of people on this. I want to see the best players play at the best event of the year. So when we are then given vampires versus prank kids, what was it again? What was that awful vampires versus? I can't remember. It was terrible. That's a little bit disappointing, right? We want to see. I want to see the top players in Europe who didn't qualify for Worlds, who just missed out on the top race, and I want to see their journey through the event. I want to see like Tom Rose play. I want to see Typhoon. I want to see Raphael. I want to see all of these big names in the play.
Yes and no. I think it's much easier to make the case for the European Championship because it's like the culmination of the entire year. But just imagine every YCS we would only feature the same guys. And I don't think that's what you're saying. You're saying YCS keep it as it is, probably, but at the WCQ we should really focus on the top players.
But the thing is, like, you say like the same players, but it's not really the same because there are so many good quality players. You would have a different person every round,
Yeah, but there was a time when Raphael Nevin had his first feature match. And personally, I think that's a horrible example because...
It was terrible, Raphael, I heard.
No, that's not what I mean, but...
Okay.
When we started featuring Raphael, and I don't mean this to offend him, but I would say he was more or less like a nobody. Like, nobody really knew him at the time. He was starting to get consistent. And it's always the same like this. The first feature match of Jonas Koschel, I was like, who is that guy? Even though Tom Rose said, oh, this guy is like ridiculously consistent. You should have an eye on him and everything. And there are, I would say there's like 5 other Jonas Koschels out there who are just like one win away from making the top cut at like every event. And consider we have this Paul Schuffenecker, best last name in the world, Schuffenecker. We haven't featured him once in an entire year, although he was sitting at the top of this top 8 player playoff. So there are a lot of guys out there that we want to get to know, because for somebody who's now going to the events or now starting to watch the stream, who's now getting into Yu-Gi-Oh!, the story is not like, the interesting story to him is not, oh, you want to be like Raphael Nevin, the guy who has now won 2 YCSs and been in the top card of a million other events. The story for a new guy is, you want to be like this guy who has been playing the game for 2 years, never made the top cut, been to 20 events, and now for the first time ever with a creative deck, he just barely made the top cut. Because that's the story that you want to put in the head of like the small guy. Someone like, what's the UK national winner? You were there.
Marcus Patel.
Thank you. Like, he was featured in the coverage when he was at his first ever YCS. And that's the kind of callback you want to have, where you're like, hey, look at this guy. He came to an event just for fun with his dad and his brother, scrubbed out, played Dragon Duel, whatever, had a good time, but didn't really win anything. And now, like a couple of years back, is super competitive, very serious about the game, even wins the UK National Championship, like a 3rd or 4th largest in Europe. That's like, those are the stories. And if we only go to our Joshuas and Raphaels and so on and so on and so on, we don't have these stories. We only have this story that is, oh, this guy that won 20 events won another feature match. And we need to introduce new guys constantly to the audience.
Well, I think that you have a lot of well-qualified players who keep an eye on the competitive game, who keep an eye on the Yu-Gi-Oh! Scene and know who the up-and-coming great players are. So when you have people like Tom Rose, Marcello picking the feature matches, when they look through like the potential feature matches, I believe that they can pick good players who don't have feature match experience, but are getting there and making a name for themselves. You know, there's like Vlad in chat just now. He wasn't known at all 1 year ago, I don't think.
Yeah.
You know, but here he's had like many tops this season, and he's achieved a lot on stream, and he's, you know, doing really well in the game. And like, I feel like that's kind of the quality of player we want, the people who are on the cusp of greatness. Because I understand we can't just have like 20 top Andy every feature match, right? That's obviously, you know, because at the same time, a feature match is not fun to watch if it's just, I don't want to be explicit here, bad, but at the same time, we don't want to see a feature match where it's just, you know, the like Billy Break stomping on someone just getting like Jesse Cotton FTKing that child who had UFO turtle in his deck or something. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
At the same time, that's a good player, but we don't want to see that. I mean, that's just, you know, it's just bullying.
Yeah, but the problem is we don't know that up front. Like going into the match, we don't have time picking these matches. Like we get the pairings and then we have like 2 minutes to come up with a match. So what you're doing is like you're frantically control Fing, and then you're going Joshua Schmidt, some guy who's been in the game forever. Like I always look what Sona is playing against, for example. Those are like the guys. You have like your 10, 20, maybe even 30 go-to guys, but you can't even search for 30 guys. And especially in round 1, it's super hard because the table number means nothing, absolutely nothing. So you normally go with the guy that won the last event, which in some cases is Jesse Cotton. And then Jesse Cotton gets paired against the kid. And all you see is Jesse Cotton plays against some guy I've never heard of. So you're like, okay, let's feature that. Let's see what happens. They sit down and you're like, crap. Like they just sat down and we were like, we don't want to feature that. But as I explained earlier, we are 10 minutes behind the main event. So everybody else already started playing. I can't even stop another match and say, hey, come over to the feature match area, because I would have to stop them. They would have to start from scratch. I did that once in my life, and I will never hear the end of it, where somebody was accusing me of being responsible for him losing in the feature match.
Yeah, that's really bad. Yeah.
So obviously that is really bad. But then we also have to enter the deck list of the 2 new guys. We first have to search for the deck list. So that means we're going to be 30 minutes, 40 minutes behind the main event, and we cannot really delay the event that much. Like, coverage should be... as I said earlier, we're running these events for marketing purposes. So in the real world, coverage is here, judges and everything else is here. In the idea of the judges, and I don't blame them because I used to be a judge, judges and smooth event and everything is here and coverage is here. They don't understand that it should be swapped. And I get that. A lot of judges get that by now, because I had a lot of discussions in the evenings in hotels where I explained this to them. And when somebody goes into an event with the idea that we're running these events to make profit, then they might think that it's really important for all the players that the event is really smoothly run and everything. And it is. But I've had events that were a shit show, but the coverage looked absolutely amazing. And everybody who was at home was like, I'm coming to the next event. And if I have the choice between the two, should the coverage be shit and the event is smoothly run, or the event is not ideally run, but the coverage is great, I should, from a business perspective, always pick coverage is great.
Okay, that's fair. So we're I only planned to try and stream with you for an hour, but you've had so many interesting points that I wanted to develop and stuff. So I'm sorry if I'm taking up too much of your time, but this is really great. So are you okay to go on to a little bit longer just for some Q&A and then we'll wrap up?
It's okay. I can sleep when I'm dead.
Wow.
I got a lot of gray hair already. I got kids, so...
I don't know if you noticed the copy pasta going in the Twitch chat.
Yeah, I hate that stuff. I mean, yeah, I'm chuckling about it, and then I'm like, okay, that's it. That was fun. And like when I see that at the YCS, I'm like, I'm gonna time out the shit out of all of you guys, because I get that this is funny for you. I get it 100%. I would probably do the same if I was 15 years younger, but there is this mythical creature that people think in the Konami office exists, which is a parent that is concerned about the hobby that their kid is playing. So they are trying to get an idea of what the hobby is like. So they are watching these streams. And then there's this 40-year-old woman who's got like a kid that's like 10 years old and it's got just about to start Yu-Gi-Oh! And she's like sitting down with him in front of a computer and she's like, oh, let's watch the high quality production stream from Europe because those are always entertaining. And then she sees the chat and it's just copy pasting all over the place. And she's like, fuck this bullshit. You're not going to play this game anymore. And this is the reason why we can't have that in the official chat. This is like where we're like, nope, we can't do this. It's just not happening. I get it's funny, but not to the 40-year-old woman. It's funny to her son, and that's cool. But that's not who we're doing this for. Not exclusively.
I don't know how much you watch Twitch, and I don't know how much you're involved with like that kind of culture, but I feel like there's sometimes a bit of a disconnect with Konami and how they perceive their player base, because I feel like Konami are trying to endorse this PG, child-friendly, come have fun with this game, but the reality is Yu-Gi-Oh players are young adults. They are late teens. They are young. They're in their early 20s. They are students.
Some are fathers.
Yeah, some are fathers. Some are have working careers and stuff like that. Like this is most of your the majority of your player base that I can see at the competitive level. That's your player base, So do you think it's a bit like, I don't want to say delusional, but do you not think it's kind of a disconnect from what Konami are trying to promote vis-a-vis what's the reality of the situation?
So what I can tell you, there was a time when Upper Deck, so obviously many, many years back, there was a time when Upper Deck considered buying out the Yu-Gi-Oh license. They would have put serious money on the table, many millions, and they wanted to buy out all of the other parties. They wanted to buy out Konami and Shueisha and TV Tokyo, whatever their names are. And they couldn't really do it, but they wanted to do it. And the first thing that Upper Deck would have done is 100% embracing what the community is like, which means we would have had a pro player program with prize, serious prize money. we would have had streaming way earlier, and so on and so on and so on. And I'm not saying this to hate on Konami, because I don't. I completely understand where they are coming from. I understand how frustrating it is for the players that they try to cater to an audience that is not their target audience. That's basically what you're saying. But again, it's not Konami making all the decisions. It's several companies, and if you are like the head of 4Kids Entertainment in America, who's producing all of these TV shows that are aimed at 12-year-olds, 16-year-olds, you don't want to be associated with another guy or a product where they're basically cursing on the stream and fully embracing the Twitch culture. And as I am saying this, I'm seeing complete utter chaos in the chat. So I'm like, yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm not advocating for, let's like get like strippers up on stage and let's start like, like screaming.
You have obviously not been to YCS Prague then.
Yes,
but that's what happens after the event.
Yeah, so I mean, that's not what we're advocating for. Even something as simple as like no swearing, I can totally get behind that. I myself try my best to, reduce my language in all of my videos.
Yeah.
Maybe not on stream, but most of my videos recently I've tried. So, but the point is, it's like, there is, I can understand, like, they are trying to promote the game to younger people, and yes, some parents and stuff might be involved, but I feel like that is a very small demographic for who actually is funding their game. From what I can tell, even at my locals and stuff, it's people like weird. My age.
No, I get, that's very awkward, because this is like a bit like a political statement. There's a bit of a silent majority. I'm not 100% sure if they are really the majority. At this point, probably not anymore. But Yu-Gi-Oh! Is selling a lot of cards in stores like Toys R Us. So not in hobby stores where people come to play, but rather in big stores that are selling plenty of different things, and sometimes toys, sometimes exclusively toys. Like in Germany, there's Kaufland and things like that. Like you have these gigantic store chains that are, in America it would be Walmart, that are selling a million different things. And then somebody also puts booster packs in front of the cashier where you're checking out. So all the kids are like, mommy, I want to have cards. And these guys also matter. Obviously, they are not the ones that are going to be the loudest. They are not the ones who are leading the conversation, be it on Twitch or anywhere else. But they are there, and they are a very, very large part of why Yu-Gi-Oh! Is as successful as it is. And you don't want to give them something to be like, okay, I'm not supporting this anymore.
Yeah.
But I get it. I would love if we could just go 100% all in, but it's just not the business reality from what I know.
Sure. Just looking through some questions to take here. What would you like to see from the sort of team coverage thing? Because I know it's only like recently you guys have started to allow people to even like, have like a sponsored team jersey, for example.
Don't say that out
loud. But I think team as the concept of a team and the idea of having a group of people that you test with regularly, who may or may not be sponsored from different companies like Ultimate Guard and stuff, is regular. Do you think there would be something cool, or do you have any ideas for what would be like an interesting thing to have with coverage, just involving teams more?
Yeah, you could do like team cups and everything. You could go completely crazy. There was a time when they did heavily promote teams. And again, another testament how long I've been in this and how old I am at this point.
I can still hear you, by the way. I just need to be back 2 minutes, so you can keep talking. Just
no worries. Ahead. So there was a time when the coverage was done on metagame.com, on this website that was basically sponsored by Upper Deck, but kind of ran as an independent entity. There wasn't like Upper Deck in the legal information of the website, as far as I know. And at the time, they were writing a lot of articles, and then it was very focused on teams. Like a lot of it was focused on teams. So you would have Team Overdose versus some other team. I don't even remember the name, but Overdose was like one of the very big ones that was constantly in the coverage. And what they found out at the time was that the player numbers started to drop when they were really, really focusing on the teams in the coverage, because there were more players that thought that it doesn't make sense for them to come to the big events, which back in the days was the Shonen Jump Championship, because they guessed that the players at home thought, oh, there's no point for me going to these events because I can only win these events, I can only do well at these events if I'm part of a very big team that is very successful, where I can playtest with like 2 million people, and so on and so on and so on. And that is when they went the exact opposite direction. They completely stepped on the brakes, and they didn't have any feature of teams whatsoever in the coverage. So they wouldn't even mention it in passing. This and this guy who was a member of this and this team won this and this event. Whereas just 4 weeks earlier or months earlier, it was all about the teams and about how the team prepared together, how they came up with the best tech, with the best strategy, and so on and so on and so on. And so they tried this out. They felt like it didn't work for them, and then they went back in the other direction. And they said, "Okay, we don't wanna really focus on teams anymore." And now it's like a sinus curve basically. So there was a time when they were heavily focusing on teams, and we were going all the way down. Nobody was talking about teams, and now I'm trying to push for the way up again. Like, I'm not sure if we're gonna get there. If it needs to be a balancing act. I don't want to go all in again on selling this story that you need to be in a team to win an event, but maybe I have to also look at what's real.
That's a thing I've never really considered before, and it actually makes a lot of sense. I suppose from a competitive perspective, you might be dissuaded to kind of compete if
I mean, how many guys do you know that won large events that are not members of a team?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Because I have a hard time coming up with them.
Yeah, that's a very good
one
point.
of my running gags actually in the finals when one guy is sitting there without a team jersey, and I'm always like, oh, and here we got this guy who's a member of this team, and he's playing this and this deck, and he's going up against this guy, and if he wins, his prizes will include a sponsorship for Team Eman Games. Because there was a short while when they were just sponsoring every guy that won a larger tournament. They always claim that's not true, but I'm like, yeah, I've been there. I've seen this firsthand.
Shoutouts to Eman Games for leading the charge in the transfers over the course of last
summer. Transfer market. Yeah, we should have a fantasy league and everything, like a transfer market for Yu-Gi-Oh! I would be the first guy to push for that.
I want to address Sonar's question because I thought it was pretty good, and I think we'll probably wrap this up. What do you think we should have in terms of prize support to help promote the game more? Because the where it is now, it's not a secret that prize support is just awful for for anyone. You're if you don't get further than top 8, I think top 8, you're playing a 12-13 round Winamat essentially.
I don't know, the prize support for the Dragon Duel Championship was quite cool last weekend.
Well, okay, sure. The Dragon Duels seem to be disproportionately a lot better than the main event, which is weird.
I don't know how many players played in it. I would guess something like 30 or 40, and like the top 8 all got the prize card. And I think like the top 4 got 2 copies of the prize card. I was like, okay.
But even then, think about it. A prize card, is that really adequate support for doing that? Well, because, from Konami's perspective, how much does it really cost to put ink on a cardboard? It's the players who attribute that value, and
that is true.
And at that point,
but I think nobody would complain if we had, let's say, alternate art cards for like the top 32 players or something like that. Because again, to Konami, it wouldn't be worth, in terms of production costs, it wouldn't be worth a whole lot. But for the players, would be quite cool.
Sure.
So so there's two sides of this story. So the one thing is, should we have more prizes in general? My personal opinion is yes, we should. I mean, like I said, guy comes 8th place, 16th place at German Nationals, walks away with a box. I'm like, okay, ridiculous in my personal opinion. But that's just my personal opinion. I get that. Yeah, some people will. I might get angry comments for that, but It's just really what I think. I think if you're like in the top 1% of a tournament, and actually that's a 1/10 of 1%. Now I'm sounding like Sanders. You should get some decent prices. That's just my opinion. Should they give out other stuff like prize money, PlayStations, Nintendo Switches, or whatever the current console is called? The kids are not old enough; they don't play it. I don't know. It doesn't need to be, in my personal opinion. I'm okay with them giving out product or price cards. I think it should be exclusive items, like a special playmat for Top Card. In my opinion, is a cool price. Special alternate art card is a cool price. Stuff like that. And while we're talking about it, the same should be true for the judges. I mean, judges should get exclusive price cards or judge promos, whatever you want to call them. Again, doesn't cost a whole lot. Would make a very big difference for them to finance their trips to these events.
I mean, that's a point I was going to ask. When you think about it, like people who top an event, they are literally like within roughly like the top 1% of players of that event who made it that far.
1/10 of 1%.
Yeah, exactly. So, if you're getting it that far, do you not agree that in concept, at least, they should at the very minimum be breaking even with how they spend money to get there? I mean, it's very expensive to go to YCS. You have accommodation you have to pay for 3 or 4 nights. You have your flights.
I don't know how most of these guys are doing it, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, I was playing competitively a different card game, the WoW TCG, and the top 8 guys at these events would get like a Spectral Tiger, which was between 500 and 800 euros. And they would also get like an iPad or something. And I was breaking even left and right all the time. We were in a team, 4 guys would just do a prize split. And then like every event, we had like 2 guys in the top 8. We weren't like the best players, but there were like 150 players at these tournaments, and the top 8 would run away with ridiculous prizes. We would at least break even at every event. And some events we would make ridiculous money, like, I don't know, 500 euros per person. That's the kind of game that I would play if I was a card gamer, to be honest.
It's like it's such a free thing for these companies to do, though, because it's like, here's something that has no monetary value. And I mean, you can't sell cardboard for like legal tender or anything. You would have to find someone who specifically in Yu-Gi-Oh could do something with that, right? So if depending on the dice that you roll in the format, you might be ending up with a prize card that's worth 200-300 compared to Minerva or something, which is like, if you like, that's a prize card you want to win because you're gonna break even on that event and then some. But with the new prize card that was coming, spoilers, boys, like it's like from a financial perspective, that's not much to like win if you're getting the new Link 4. So
no, I agree. Like I don't like the current pricing, to be honest. But it is what it is, and there are reasons for that. Most likely, the many companies that all have a say in what Yu-Gi-Oh is doing.
Well, thank you so much for joining me.
Actually, if it's okay, Sona's question was like, it was a bit different because what he was asking is, do you think that more prizes would lead to more players? If I'm paraphrasing here.
Okay, yeah. So
because I think that's something worth addressing, because it's a different thing because I agree prizes should be better, but there were card games, entire card games that were built on the idea, if you throw out ridiculous amounts of prizes, people will come and play the card game. And that did not happen. Like Versus System was basically a top-down designed game. They didn't start with like, oh, let's have a hobby league, and then have like something like a store championship, and then have a regionals, and then on top of that have the world championship. They started the game and they said the first thing they did was like, here is the $250,000 pro circuit. So you could win ridiculous amounts of prize money. Like the first guy would walk away with 10,000, 20,000, ridiculous amounts of money. And that was like part of the reason why they tried to make this game, or how they tried to make this game appealing. And the game fell completely flat on their face, or on its face, because you cannot build a TCG from top down. You cannot start at the top and say, oh, the World Championship is gonna be worth so much money. You should really aspire to do that. You need to build every single TCG from the ground up. You need to have very, very strong grassroots support. You have to do a lot of stuff in the stores, even though the stores might make only a little bit of money, but you need all the stores to carry your product and to keep running tournaments for it. And then on top of that, you increase. You need to work from the bottom up and not from the top down. So I think that more prizes would not necessarily, unfortunately, make the game grow. If that was the case and prizes would be such a big deal, all of these CSL events should be stacked with lots and lots of players, because the prizes are relatively good considering how many players tend to show up for these events. It's just not happening. Nobody's going to these events.
I mean, we have, physical evidence and proof of prize support not necessarily being enough in Yu-Gi-Oh! I'm sure people are aware of, in America, there is tournament organizers that run cash prizes for their events, and their turnouts have been dropping. So throwing in more money doesn't necessarily mean more people are going to attend.
I mean, they had this discussion the other day where somebody asked, what's better, top 32 at a YCS or winning an ARG event? And I thought it was pretty obvious, because the ARG event is, I don't know, 1,000 or something. I don't even know. And I was like, I would take the $500 every single day. That's just how I work. And then there were a million people in this thread who said, no, I'm going to take the top 32 because it means something, and nobody cares about the ARG events.
Because I think most people, if you play Yu-Gi-Oh! Competitively, you've just conceded to the fact that you're not playing to, this isn't poker, right? You're not trying to make a living for yourself. You are playing because you like this game and you want to make something out of playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Rather than...
Let's call it what it is. It's an addiction for many people.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think this is a good way to end it off. What do you think about a YCS in Scotland?
Yeah, I got family there. I'll be the first to raise my hand. Although I have to say, at the moment, I think that the French guys, they deserved it. I dislike Paris with a passion, and it's
very German of you.
Yeah, but I've been there. It's not like I just say that with like no idea of what it's like. I've been there, I don't know, 5 or 7 times, and 6 out of those 7 times was really, really bad experience. I had like one good event in France, and it's really awkward. Like you try, you make an effort, you say bonjour, you try to show people that you respect their culture as much as it's possible. Obviously, I'm going to sound very, very different from somebody who has a house in France and learn some pickup lines and everything. But still, you're trying, you're showing them, hey, I'm happy to be here. And they just not having it. They're just like in your face, almost spitting in your face, like no customer service. They kick you out of restaurants because you don't understand their menu. When there's like 10 people of you and you want to eat something, I just don't understand that, to be honest. So, but having said all that, I still believe that the French guys absolutely deserve another YCS. Hopefully not in Toulouse, because we only had 400 players there. Nothing against the city. Don't really know anything about the city. It was just a very small event. But right after that, we can go to Scotland, if you ask me.
Yep. YCS Glasgow. Coming soon, confirmed. You heard it here first, boys.
Yeah, I've not been at Marcello's house. He never invited me. I didn't know about this house before the finals, which is, again, travesty.
So, yeah, again, thank you so much for joining me. It's been a pleasure to have you here. I would love to have you on in the future again, because this was a great conversation. I hope everyone in the chat here enjoyed it as well. And I hope you guys learned a lot and got a very different perspective to what we're used to. So thank you so much.
YCS Rostock. Go home, you're drunk. YCS Rostock. Jesus, jump off a bridge.
So again, to confirm for anyone who may or may not be aware, Ollie here is not working as a representative of Konami. He is freelance. He is contracted by them as an independent. So remember that all his opinions that he shared here are his own and what he feels, and not representative of Konami Digital Entertainment as a whole. So thank you so much for joining me, Oliver. It's been a pleasure. And do you have any final comments or things you'd like to say before you go?
Oh no, I mean, people should really not be afraid to approach me, because I've seen this where some players at a YCS or something like, oh, it's that guy. And I'm like, yeah, obviously it's that guy. I'm one of like 3 people in the venue that are wearing a suit. It's not that hard to understand who I am. And if you have like a question, or some people want to have a feature match or something, you can You can approach me, you can talk to me. Some people want to have a selfie. That's also, I don't mind. We can have a selfie together. It's called a groupie. If you have a selfie with several people, it's a groupie. So just hit me up at one of the upcoming events. I'm normally very friendly to talk to. If I don't have time, I'm going to let you know that I don't have time, and most people are very understanding. So thank you for that. And then we can make it happen. We can take a photo. You can maybe have a feature match if you're not playing the meta deck of the weekend with 2 cards different, and think that's making a difference, because it's not. And you would be surprised.
Yeah.
And so hit me up, let me know, especially if you feel like we're doing a good job. That always helps. Some of these events are very, very stressful. We don't try to show it while the camera is rolling, but behind the scenes we're like, oh my god. So every time somebody is coming up to us and says, hey, I really appreciate what you're doing, that means the world to me. So thank you guys a lot for that.
All right, awesome. For those of you who may not be on YouTube watching this later on, I'm sure Ollie may be lurking in the comments somewhere. So if there's any questions that you might have or something that you would like to know, I'm sure he'll be down there somewhere in a couple days to answer anything you might be curious about.
Sure, link me to it, and I'm gonna turn it into an AMA.
Sure, there you go.
AMA in the YouTube comments section.
There you go, guys. We have an AMA. All right, thank you, everyone, and take care.
Have a good night.